Hey everyone, so this is a call, and what I want to talk about in this video is I'm going to talk about why somebody might want to do a transmutation, sexual transmutation practice while abstaining from ejaculation. But before I get into that, what I wanted to kind of bring up real briefly, everyone's got something to sell you, right? So down below the video is my sexual energy coaching program. There's a video-based version, which is pretty inexpensive, and also the one-on-one version, which can take place either in person if you're around the city of Chicago, or it can happen online through like a conference call. If you're interested in cultivating your sexual energy, you're interested in elevating your overall sort of spiritual energy, you may want to check out this program, link down below the video. So this video, like I said, it's focused on this idea of transmuting the energy. And the reason I'm answering this question as a video is because I had someone reach out to me and they said, well, I have some friends who've gone 90 days without ejaculation and they didn't do transmutation practices. So do I really need to? And no, you don't. You don't need to. The reason you don't need to is because you can abstain from ejaculation and that's fine. It's simply exercising a choice. There's a number of reasons why you might want to transmute the energy. And the first reason that I'm going to give, you can do some research on this one. I'm just going to put it out there as a possibility. Okay, so the first reason has to do with prostate inflammation. So inflammation is heat, right? So heat is usually caused by a congestion of energy in a particular part of the body. So it causes an inflammation or an itis, a swollen area. So any sort of inflammation, like I said, it's a congestion of energy from my perspective. So in my opinion, this is one reason you might want to transmute the energy. Other words, to shift it out of the sex center upward, right? Of which the sort of prostate is very connected to the genitalia. So that whole general region, we want to shift this energy upward. So that's one reason. Like I said, you may want to kind of dig around about that. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell you why prostate inflammation happens, but there is something about the frequency of ejaculation and men getting prostate issues. So there may be something to it. So the other reason you may want to practice a transmutation, you may want to have a transmutation practice rather, is if your goal is primarily about working with energy or spiritual in nature, this is why I did it. I went almost a year without ejaculation, without any sort of specific sexual transmutation practices. I was doing Kundalini yoga at the same time. So although I wasn't connecting to that energy directly. So what makes sexual transmutation practice special is that you're connecting to that energy directly. You're working with that energy directly. You're not repressing it and you're not expressing it. You're simply like shifting it. So like I said, I found that my personal energetic -- spiritual progress escalated, tenfold when I started doing transmutation practices. But again, that was my goal. My goal was to have more visions. My goal was to be more connected to my body. My goal was to integrate the mind and the body in general. My goal was to essentially access the innate gifts I've been given at birth. So transmutation practice helped me do that because sexual energy, and this is the number 2 reason you might want to look into it, sexual energy is a very loud voice. It's a very loud signal, comes from the body that men can get very identified with. So a transmutation practice, while you're abstaining from ejaculation, will help even out the energy so that you don't, how do I say this? So essentially you don't want to filter your world through sex, right? So you don't want your perceptual lens to be filtered through sex. In other words, you want to see a woman as a woman. You want, the point is that you don't want everything to be sexualized. Because if you're sexualizing existence, again, it's a filter. So you want to be as open to reality, open to the present moment as possible, meaning all the nuance of the present moment, not just, this sexual screen that gets put over it. where you start to look at every woman as, you know, a sex object, that kind of thing. I think you get what I'm saying. I don't want to belabor the point, but the transmutation practice will help shift the energy out of the genitalia, out of the lower chakras, so that this energy can then circulate. And again, just to keep in mind that, you know, when I say sexual energy, it's not energy that's separate from the rest of your life force energy. It's just that sexual energy is like water. Water rolls down a hill and it will settle at its base. So if this water is rolling down a hill and settling at its base, essentially what it does is once it settles, it creates a signal, and the signal is horny. And when horny rises, we become identified with it, attached to it. That is if we're not exercising objectivity and we're not being mindful, I guess, and aware of what it is. So generally speaking, horny rises, men get rid of it. In the case of this video, we're talking about men, horny rises, and then they say, so what, right? So, so one of the things about a transmutation practice says, no, I'm not going to sit there and push this energy away. I'm going to connect to it and shift it. So, and again, what that does is it just evens out the flow of energy in the body so that you're not so attached to it. So another reason you may want to practice sexual transmutation has to do with your libido. And I call this the out of sight, out of mind principle, which is if, and this doesn't work for all dudes. For me, as my sexual energy started to build, it was kind of what I described earlier. It was all this water that settled down at the base and it was just loud all the time. I couldn't escape the perception, my sort of sexual coloring of reality. So in this particular case, something else that could happen, which is somebody simply becomes super busy. In other words, they become disconnected from the sexual energy. So it's actually relatively easy for these people to not ejaculate. But the question is it beneficial, right? So if the person's practice is to consciously abstain from ejaculation, they may notice a depletion of their libido. Generally speaking, to keep in mind that a man's libido is, well, his sexual energy is his strength, right? So we need to work with this as a strength. So one of the other things that can happen here is if a man feels disconnected from his libido, he's also disconnected to some degree from his pleasure principle. The idea of pleasure is that pleasure is a pathway into the body. It's a pathway into connecting. So I don't know. Maybe some guys don't like being horny. Maybe some guys don't like the sexual energy feelings. Maybe some guys don't care for sex, and that's fine. So low libido for them maybe is fine. Not okay for me. I like having a high libido, and I like having access to that energy when I choose. So that's why I do transmutation practices. So I can, I hesitate to use the word control, but rather I want sexual energy to be a tool, like a screwdriver, like a hammer, as opposed to me being the tool. So sexual energy, men utilize it in one of two ways. Either they express it, meaning release it, or they repress it. So the question I would have if somebody is experiencing a diminished libido, even though they're abstaining from ejaculation for a long period of time and not doing any transmutation practices, the low libido in some ways to me says that it's being cut off or repressed in some ways. Again, speculation. But this is one reason you may want to do transmutation practice, because it connects you back to that energy. So you abstain from ejaculation and you connect to that energy so that you can then move it. So in other words, it's a more holistic way of approaching abstaining from ejaculation. So hopefully that makes sense. And that's really all I have to say in this video. Is those are kind of my top reasons, is, you know, to avoid repression. You know, again, to you know, spiritualize the energy. And, you know, what was the other reason? You know, to clear one's perceptual lens. When I say clear one's perceptual lens, that's the assumption that those are the individuals that when they abstain from ejaculation, the horny feeling becomes incredibly loud. Okay, so anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hope you found it helpful. And thank you all for watching.